Great. Okay. Well, I'm sure we'll have a few more folks trickling in over the next few minutes, but I think we can get started. Welcome everybody to the November proposal review. These calls are give proposal authors with active proposals in the current cycle a chance to present and discuss their proposals with the community and also to answer questions from the community. We have a very, very special proposal review call today because we have all of the 2024 org proposals going through governance this month. Woo. And we will say a little bit more to those later, but these are very important proposals as they will fund the work of all of these orgs through 2024. And they are also very beefy proposals. So that is why you may have noticed today that the call is an hour and a half rather than the usual hour. Yeah, so we're really excited to have all of the proposal authors of these proposals here today, and a lot of contributors from the various orgs who also contributed time and effort into creating the proposals and answering questions from folks in the community. So thanks everyone for being here. First, before we get started, a few housekeeping items. This call will be recorded and shared with the community publicly for those who are unable to make these calls. If you have a question, please feel free to write a message in the chat or raise your hand, and please wait your turn to ask your questions and speak as we go through the call. And as always, please just be kind and respectful to everyone presenting and everyone else participating in the call. So we have a few announcements and reminders. So the monthly governance committee update is posted. These are posted every second Wednesday, so the same day as these calls. You can find them under the governance section on the forum under governance projects and updates. I'll share the link to this one here in just 1 second. Oops, there we go. That we also have, just so everybody knows, we are not planning on doing a November proposal cycle. This is just to recognize the lower attention capacity towards the end of the year and around the holidays, and also just to kind of give everyone a little break from a long year of governance. The normal schedule or the normal monthly cycles will return in January of 2024. If you already follow the governance updates channel on the Radworks Discord or the notifications proposal tag, you will be notified of all of these updates as we go along. If you don't follow those things, I highly recommend it because it's always helpful. Then a few, just a quick update on recent proposals. So last month, in last month's cycle, we had RGP 17, which was a social proposal to gain consensus from the community around upgrading our governance contracts from Compound Alpha to the successor or another successor of Open Zeppelin Governor. This proposal passed, meaning that Scopelift, the team that was involved or that will be involved with doing the upgrade, has started working on preparing those contracts and testing them. There will be another proposal that will have to be passed, an executable proposal, so an on-chain proposal, in order to implement those contracts once they're done. But we don't expect that to happen until either January or the February cycle of next year. In the meantime, shout out to all of the Radicle and Drips devs. Ben from Scopelift, who's leading the charge here on this project, mentioned that he would be really happy to get some input from you folks at some point once they get to a point where the contracts have been prepared a bit more, or the testing has been prepared a bit more. And he'll let me know when he's ready for that feedback, and then I'll also be sure to distribute that information so everybody who is interested has a chance to also give some input on this project as well. So now for the main event, we have the 2024 org proposals. As I mentioned, these are very important and beefy proposals, and the kind of purpose of these org proposals is really to request, or they act as a request to the Radworks community to fund their continuous milestone-based work through the end of the following year. We are presenting them in the November cycle so that we can be sure to have everything hopefully passed and confirmed by the end of November, and that funds will be able to be distributed to the orgs before the start of the new year. This year, or for the 2024 org proposals, there's a few extra elements to them than there were to the 2023 org proposals. You may have already noticed or read on the forum the retrospective from each org, which is, just looking back on the last year and looking at progress and, spending review and kind of KPIs that were met over the last year. And the second element is the Memorandum of Understanding, or an MOU. You can kind of think of this as like the agreement between Radicle and Drip, so the two product orgs, and how they define their individual relationships with Radworks and the Radworks community. These both can be found, or all of these can be found for all of the orgs can be found under the org updates category on Discourse. I'll also share that here in the chat. There you can find all of their retrospectives and the two MOUs from Radicle and Drips. I actually wanted to take a moment and pause before we dive into the proposals and invite Abby to add any context or comments around these different proposal elements before we move forward. Just really wanted to make sure we set the stage so everybody understands what all of these documents are before we dive into talking about them.
Yeah, I think your overview was super clear. I think the only thing that I'd say about the introduction of these two additional pieces of information is to just continue providing more context about not only the current stage, the future stage of where the org is going and the work being proposed, but the progress that was made in the previous year to introduce more accountability between DRIPS and the community of people who are voting on these proposals, while also giving us all a more clarity around roadmaps, progress, and perspectives. So that's just kind of the role of these two docs. I consider them like iterations on this whole org proposal process in general, and I think are all really interesting to read through if you haven't, in addition to the org proposals. That's all I'll say.
Great. Thank you. Then we can get started. So today we have 4 org proposals to review. The first being the RGP 17 or 18, with being the Radicle org proposal, RGP 19 for the DRIPS org, RGP 20 for the grants org, and RGP 21 for the foundation org. Unless there are any objections, I would propose we just go in the order of this list, with the exception of grants going last. Borden had asked if it was okay if he went last today, but is everybody else fine with that plan? If yes, I will stop sharing my screen here and I can hand it over to Cloudhead. Can I get a thumbs up, an okay, a yes?
Sure.
Awesome. Great. Okay, let me stop sharing here. The floor is yours.
You want me to go through the proposal? Because I mean, probably most people have already read it.
Yeah.
If you saw the email that we sent you, there's a couple bullet points of what you're supposed to review, which is your 2023 retrospective, so the progress that you've made, an overview of your proposal, and then any direct replies to questions in the discourse. And I think that there's still some unanswered questions in the forum that people will want to touch on. So just give a 5 to 10 minute overview of what you've done and what you're proposing to do next, and then chat through some of the comments on the proposal.
Actually, yeah, and I'm sorry, Cloudhead, to stop you there for a second, just so everybody knows, we'll allow for, about 5 to 10 minutes for each org to present and discuss the proposal, and then we'll also allow for another, like, 5 to 10 minutes for a Q&A for each proposal, so about 20 minutes each max. I'll be keeping track of time on the side and like write little reminders in the chat to let people know when it's about time to move on. But yeah, Cloudhead, do you want, I can also share the, like, my screen, or otherwise you can just share the proposal on the forum. That would be fine as you walk through it.
Yeah, I will share the old and the new. That way I can review the old quickly and then move to the new one. Let's do that.
Great.
So, what is this? Yeah, this is right. All right, should load. Okay, it should be good. So this is last year's proposal, just to be clear, which means it was for this year, and the only thing I'm going to go through quickly is the objectives and roadmap for this year, and then kind of talk about what we did, what we didn't do, etc. So the main objectives for this year was to get closer to GitHub feature parity, stabilize the tech stack, and relaunch a social media presence. So in the beginning of the year, we relaunched, launched a new website, relaunched the Twitter account, and launched a new community chat on Zulip. So those were kind of the things we did there. We didn't end up launching a technical blog yet, though that's still planned, and we didn't set anything up on Mastodon or Nostr, and that is also planned for next year. In terms of stabilization, that's what most of the year was spent on and is still being spent on. So there were a few RIPs that were written, and the reference implementation was has had a lot of work put into it, and is now at a state where it's fairly stable. Right, and then in terms of the GitHub feature parity, that's obviously like a long journey, but the things we focused on were issues and pull requests, which we call patches. Those are essentially both working. Of course, repository hosting, that's a given, but the three first ones are essentially working, and we're using them internally to build Radicle. They're not completely feature complete, but they're in a good place. We've started on CI/CD a couple months ago. That is probably not going to make it into V1, but it might make it into V1.1. Although, yeah, there might be parts of it that make it into V1. And the rest we haven't started on. So user profiles, org, search, and notifications. There hasn't been any work done there, and there for now is no work planned there. Although we want to have those things, but it's not like yet. Yeah, we haven't started on it really. So yeah, that's basically for last year. And now moving on to maybe any questions on this? Anything?
Yeah, could you walk us through the roadmap? Because the roadmap has
last year's roadmap, or the one for this year, I mean? Yeah.
Last year's roadmap. So yeah, as one of the pieces of the retrospective section, we asked everybody to include in their proposal. There's like one specific question about like, how did you meet the milestones and deadlines that were set out in your roadmap? So there's a bunch of things. Could you just speak through each of these quickly?
Yeah, sure. So the initial Heartwood release, so this happened. We moved the core team collaboration to the Radicle stack. In the beginning, just the Heartwood repo, and now the web interface repo is also on there. We implemented patches, issues, and repositories, and we finished our first or our kind of initial new brand design, which is online now. So that was good. That was kind of on schedule. Then the Q2 kind of didn't really happen in the same way that was planned. So we didn't really do an external, like a second external public release. That's kind of what we're planning for this coming year. We started working on code review functionality, but that was delayed quite a bit. We started on the overhaul of the web app. That's a lot of that was done already, but so rebrand and everything, but some of it is still in process. Community seed node is now is there, so that's that was deployed and has been running for a while. Identities was completely skipped because we didn't need it internally, and so we thought, well, if we're not using it, then maybe there's no point in building it yet. So that was skipped, and then CI/CD was well, we're in Q4 now, and CI/CD is being worked on. Probably won't be launched in Q4, but yeah, it's been started actually in Q3, and mostly research and proof of concepts, and now we're starting a new implementation as well. So that's kind of how the roadmap went, and this time did not permit, although this is going to be very, very much related to security effects are going to be very much related to CD. So the binary releases, which is something we need for ourselves as well. So that's kind of just going to be part of the CI/CD feature set.
Could you elaborate on why the public launch, the objectives queue, the second and third objectives were delayed to the next year? Like, what was the reasoning?
Yeah. So by the third, you mean the third objective? You mean the Q3 objective?
No, I mean the public release.
This one. Yeah.
The code review and the identities. So, I mean, it was just because it wasn't relevant, but why was the public release specifically like delayed?
Yeah. It was basically, I think we just weren't ready. It was, we could have launched something, but it didn't really make sense because we had essentially just started dog fooding, and we were discovering so many areas of improvements, bugs, and things like that we wanted to essentially fix and have it work well for ourselves before we actually launch it. And I'm pretty happy with that decision. I think throughout the year we improved things a lot, and it wouldn't have made sense to launch it previously, even if it was working. It just wasn't, the UX wasn't there basically. So it just didn't make sense. You asked about code review. This was kind of delayed for just, it wasn't delayed on purpose. This was kind of, we started doing code review on Zulip. We started to work on code review functionality inside of Radicle, but a lot of it turned out much more complicated than we had predicted, and so a lot of work went into kind of the like diffing and revisions to just kind of build the foundations for having code review. Now those foundations are mostly there, and we're just missing the kind of UI on top of it, or the CLI. So it's it's in progress. At the moment, we're doing code review kind of partly on Zulip, partly on Radicle, we'd like to move all of that to Radicle.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for the overview. I think it'd be really great and actually kind of necessary to have this retrospective in writing somewhere. Yeah. I haven't seen one posted on the forum at all, and I don't think it should live ephemerally in the recording of this call. So if you could take the time and like put this together, because it's all like very relevant context this week, that would be awesome. But thanks for answering my questions.
I'll move to the proposal for next year. So The 2024 proposal, the purpose I left, I kind of kept because we haven't changed our purpose. And it's still about building a sovereign code forge that can become an alternative to GitHub and GitLab. So that hasn't changed, and the way we're doing it hasn't changed either. Mainly because this year has not there haven't been any major pivots. It was really just about building out the feature set, the UX, and stability. So there were no major discoveries in terms of product, I think. Maybe just a little bit of reprioritization of certain things, but that essentially came out of actually using the thing and understanding, like, okay, this is urgent, this is not so urgent. And for example, one of those was user identities, and the other was orgs. So there's no concept of orgs in Radicle, and we thought we might need it sooner, but it turns out we don't really need it yet. So those things will be built essentially when we need it or when other users need it. And for now, that hasn't been brought up, or not much. So that hasn't changed. So in terms of the objectives obviously are a little bit different. Even though the kind of ongoing perma objective is stabilization, though that should kind of be less and less work over time. But it's still there because even after launching a V1, there's going to be small things here and there that are important to improve and to stabilize with the protocol. Even though the main thing with a V1 launch is that once that's out there, we need to be careful with breaking changes. Whereas right now we're not careful, and we're able to break the protocol and just, announce it on Zulip and have people restart their nodes or do some data migration or whatever it is. But post 1.0, that's not going to be practical. So we're going to try to, if there are breaking changes, have them be easy to migrate, but ideally not have breaking changes after the 1.0. So let's see. Yeah, so the things I have under here: improve and stabilize. So it's more about improve than stabilize, because stabilization really should happen before 1.0, and 1.0 should happen in Q1. So the rest of the year is going to be about improvements. So Radicle patches is kind of the main thing that still needs work, and that's the code review stuff that I talked about. So I'm not going to go back into that, but essentially it's line by line comments and stuff like that on patches. Issues need some work as well, although yeah, the main thing is just kind of having that integrated better in the CLI and start using the web interface internally for issues. And then CI/CD, I guess, is the big kind of new feature we want to launch next year. We are working on a native CI, which means it's so it's a CI that is designed around Radicle's primitives instead of some kind of third-party CI. But of course, we're also going to be supporting the integration of third-party CIs, because the native CI might work for us, but it's probably not going to work for other teams that have more complex workflows. So we're kind of going to be working on both of those things, but for the integration with third party, we're just going to be supporting external efforts, like with grants or other efforts to integrate other CIs. Then on the network protocol, I would say the main thing is really the hole punching. So this is something that was started this year, but we're not going to include it in V1 because it's not ready. This should be a backwards compatible change, so it shouldn't break anything. But yeah, this would allow, especially it'll make things easier for private repos, but this should help users fetch from each other without having to store repos on seed nodes. So that should be a nice improvement to the UX. Performance is something we always want to improve, and then we have a new Git fetch protocol that was deployed, that's already working. There's probably going to be a bunch of work there as well in improving the code. On the CLI, it's mostly about user experience. I just put some examples there, but there's just a lot of work on improving the user experience. On the web, kind of the same story, feature parity and UX. And then these are the notifications, user identities. These are kind of the ones that are part of the GitHub feature parity story that I think are probably the most pressing, apart from CI, of course. Notifications is the one that we have internally identified as being important and that we need. User identities is kind of more of a growth strategy, essentially being able to share your profile, and that's always been a nice thing to do on social media. Yeah, so this is again UX, docs, etc. Yeah, let's say kind of like this, the second part of the year when we start really kind of actively onboarding users post V1. It's going to be about essentially refining our roadmap for the rest of the year, figuring out if our assumptions were incorrect, essentially around for example, the notification system, or some of the other things we're working on. If we realize, okay, actually we would have certain users if we implemented wikis or whatever, then we might consider implementing wikis, right? So that's kind of what the next phase is post V1. It's kind of trying to figure out, what do we need, what do other users need, etc. Okay, yeah. I think I went into too much detail already. So yeah, roadmap, I kind of explained. Launch is the main thing. Whoops. And then as we go later in the year, it gets a bit fuzzier, but I don't know. Legal structure, that hasn't changed. And then contributors, I don't remember exactly what's in last year's, but there's obviously been changes. People have left, people have arrived. Yeah, actually a lot of the people are still here. There's a few new people, but we're about the same number, I think, around 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, yeah, around 10 people. Yeah, I think, whoops, I think not much else has changed. The budget is also, I think, fairly similar. I think a little bit more. We were asking for 1.8. This year is 2.1. Success reporting criteria, etc., are also kind of the same metrics are relevant, I think. I think this year, though, reducing breaking changes, as I said, is pretty important. This is kind of a nice metric if we have income, but I kind of doubt that this is going to happen this year. Yeah, I guess we kind of have this metric somewhere here already anyway. Yeah, that's basically it. Alexander Lange. Ooh. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a quick question. So
Sure.
with regards to your reporting and success criteria for 23 versus 24, you're keeping the same objectives. And I had written a comment about these objectives in your proposal. And you said that you weren't tracking them, but in the 23 proposal, you guys said that you use them, you track them internally or use them internally to track growth. Is that true? Is there, a way that one could kind of like see how these metrics have changed? Have you learned anything from, analyzing over the last year?
Yeah, so it's kind of informal. Like basically what I did was that at the beginning of the year, I wrote down some of the numbers we had, like number of Twitter followers, number of Zulip users, like a couple of things like that. But honestly, they haven't changed that much over the year. I mean, yeah, we went from like 30, 40 people on Zulip to like 150, but it's still, a tiny number. So, and since we haven't really done anything around growth, as I mentioned in the proposal, we didn't really expect those numbers to to change drastically. So I kind of stopped tracking them after a while because it wasn't really the success criteria in the end, which was more around the tech and product.
So do you have like a plan for how you're going to be? So now you're launching a stable release, right? So
yeah,
I think that's going to change. So do you have a plan for how you're going to be keeping track of these metrics throughout 24? And should people expect to kind of like see, public any public resources? Like I know Drips is going to have like a dashboard that they're sharing for their metrics. Are you planning something similar?
Nothing is planned, although we have talked about in the past of having a network dashboard where you kind of see like the number of nodes and things like that. I mean, I think that would be really cool. I'm just wondering where that fits in our priorities in terms of like how much time we want to invest in creating these kinds of dashboards. I think probably if we do get to a phase where we're growing in a way that, you know, seems hard to track because we're growing a lot, then I think it would be really interesting. Whereas if it's kind of slow, it doesn't seem worth it to invest so much into, you know, if we're growing from like, if we're growing by like, you know, a couple of users a day, then I would say it's not worth investing in anything metrics related, because you can just kind of count the number of users joining on Zulip. But yeah, I think at least like some kind of network metric is going to be interesting, like how many nodes are on the network, and that stat is pretty easy to get currently. It would just be a matter of graphing that somewhere, and that might be interesting to do. There's been there's some questions. So Shelby.
Yeah, hi. Thanks again for the proposal and the presentation. Excited for the Radicle 1.0 launch. Kind of similar, or my question is kind of around that. I know you had mentioned in the comments somewhere that you folks really wanted to prioritize the, you know, the product and the development, and community development was kind of not going to be as high of a priority. I guess I wanted to ask though, just because I see it as kind of a really cool opportunity with the launch of Radicle V1, are you planning to do any sort of like onboarding events or like hackathon kind of things, or something fun to draw attention to the launch, and also possibly onboard some new folks?
Yeah, I would like to do something like that. I'm just not sure we have the time and resources to do something big. The one thing that we've been talking about with Becca, for example, is to do maybe like a Radicle event at the end of next year, like something that we organize with kind of like a Radicle conference or something like that. I think that would be really nice. You know, we've just talked about it. There's nothing really planned yet. So, but that would be more towards the end of the year, not around the launch itself. Around the launch itself, I've talked also a little bit with Stellar Magnet, who's helping us with docs and some product strategy around some kind of go to market around the launch, and it's still in the design phase. There's some ideas, but again, you know, I'm kind of skeptical about investing like so much time into a launch versus putting that time into improving the product and tech at the moment, because it's either or at the moment. It's not like we don't really have people who can design, for example, product features that would that could be used for a go-to-market or doing something interesting. So if it's just social media, then it's not really gonna, you know, it's not enough, I think, to really make a difference.
Got it. Thanks.
And then Ellie, you had a question.
Yeah, my question is along the lines of Shelby's question. I left this on the forum. You know, like when I look at the 2023 like progress, I think it's, you know, it's really impressive what you all done on the technical front, and I'm very, very happy with that. at the same time, I'm fairly disappointed by the fact of by the lack of investment on the community front. And the reason is that, like everything else, if you all preparing to launch Radicle 1.0, in Q1, I would expect that you probably already have someone in-house that actually is thinking 100% of their time on how to make that a success. And given that as an org, we have the budget, I'm wondering why that budget's not allocated towards that, and not just the budget, right? We also have the expertise internally to help you hire that person and, get that part of Radicle, in a good state. Because I think that, think about how many years we've been thinking about Radicle 1.0, right? And now we're going to have that moment and just going to be somehow under communicated from the way it feels on this proposal.
Yeah, that's a good question. I we don't have that much time, but we can continue this discussion offline. But I think I've been delaying it so far because I just think that if we had this person today, I don't actually know what they would do. I wouldn't really have work for them. They would just kind of hang out.
I can help you with that. If you want, I can help you with that.
I really think we need a finished product for that role to make sense and to exist. And before that, there's really not much to do. It's just talking, but if you don't want users to actually try it out yet, then what's the point of talking about it? So I think it's what I said on the forum. I would rather launch and then really feel the need for this role and then look for it, knowing that we need it right now, essentially, or yesterday, instead of sort of preparing for the future, which is kind of unclear still.
My fear, and Sylvia, I don't know if we have time for another comment. Probably don't. So maybe I can stop.
Maybe write it on the chat.
Yeah. I will continue on the forum. I was planning on continuing on the forum. Yeah.
Cool.
Great. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you. And I apologize for pushing time here. Thank you so much, Cloudhead, for the presentation and answering the questions. And yes, please continue the discussion on the forum, in the chat, preferably on the forum, so it's more permanent and other people can read it as well. But up next, we will have the DRIPS org. So LA is already right on top of it. Take it away.
Cool. So how much time I have in total?
I said about 10 minutes to present and about 10 minutes for questions is kind of, so 20 minutes total.
Okay.
I can let you know in the chat.
Cool. Okay, so let me start with the DRIPS respective for 2023. So, all in all, it was a good year for us. I'm avoiding using the term successful as, this is it's quite subjective, but I think it was a good year for us, specifically with regards to delivery. As you can see, we completed 80% of all the milestones that we set to complete at the beginning of the year. And the biggest accomplishments that we had, of course, was actually, shipping DRIPS V2, which was something that, we've been working on for a year and a half. You can see this a little bit later, actually. And then also, the second big accomplishment was that we also started, we have a strategy that the whole team is behind, and we feel that, we can, communicate and justify. And then we feel that the strategy resonates with funders, and I'll talk more about why funders is the thing that we focused on. And right now we have Radworks, of course, all of us, funding our critical software dependencies with the tool. As of recently, we have Octant, which became the second organization that committed to fund its critical software dependencies that we will announce really soon. And then we have two more actually coming, funding the commons. There's something, brewing there, and then one more that I cannot announce publicly yet. But yeah, long story short, all of our deliverables with regards to, pieces of work and execution, 80% of those were delivered. The only red ones you will see are the integrated Radicle collaboration protocol with the assumption that it had a stable release. We didn't have a stable release. Radicle 1.0 was pushed back a few months, and that's why we did not ship that. And then the second thing is that we had actually an item to potentially deploy Drips v2 on more relevant EVM networks. I believe that I reported on this like a number of times on the community calls, but we decided not to do this simply because there's a technical, there's a risk attached to this, which is our DAO, Radworks, effectively controls the Drips contracts as is at the moment through token voting. The moment we actually deploy that on a layer 2, then we would have to go through some form of multi-sig of sorts, which comes with a lot of consequences, both on the risk front with regards to funds at risk, but also like regulatory risk and things like this that come with multi-sig. So we decided actually to not do this, and that was the second thing that is red. Outside of that, at the beginning of the year, we were thinking about basically like the only objective we had set like on a high level was to actually prove product market fit for Drips. And I'm like, when I was looking at this back at this, I was like, oh, I regret actually like stating this as is, simply because it's of course like not a binary, right? So where we stand today is that we start seeing some traction on the funder front, but of course like I wouldn't be able to come here and say we have product market fit. I cannot say this yet. The next few months actually will show how much of that we have. With regards to the metrics, we actually ended up like evolving the metrics that we want to monitor, and you will see this in my proposal. But our strategy for 2024 remains extremely funder focused, and what I mean by that is that this is one of the hard things that we learned by shipping the first version of Drips, was that for a toolkit for funding free and open source software, the only thing that matters at first is capital. And we learned this the hard way because developers basically have accounts in all of those, but they actually end up using, sticking, loving, the tools that actually bring capital to them. So what we decided to do was to actually to follow the approach of focusing exclusively on funders. And we basically said like, hey, we don't really care about at this point about, tweets and like, retweets and, like people just, creating accounts and things like that. This isn't our priority. The only thing that actually is our priority is to attract funders, organizations like Radworks, like Octant, right? That actually want to fund the critical software dependencies either as a one-off or over time, and then follow from there. So what you will see now on our metrics is that this is reflect on our metrics. The first metric we have is basically number of orgs that use Drips to fund their critical software dependencies. So that one, and number 2, the total value deposited in Drips. This number is around 1.5 million at the moment. So that's the second thing that we care a lot, and then the rest of the metrics become important later if we do well with 1 and 2. So there's this prioritization also. Like if we do well with 1 and 2, then we're looking into more recipient metrics, as we call them. So percentage of like how much of that value is actually collected by the builders, by the host developers, what percentage of projects that actually have claimed their funds also choose to continue playing that dependency game and decide to split some of their funds with their own dependencies, which is the cultural norm that we want to create. This is, at the core of it. And then the last thing is that, hopefully like next year, like we will be sitting here and talking about how many of these organizations that we managed to onboard in 2024, how many of them we will be retaining moving forward, right? Like moving into 2025, will these organizations continue to funding, their critical software dependence, or they did this as a one-off and they're not happy anymore with that offering, right? Or, whatsoever, they didn't get enough value. So that's mostly on the retrospective. Maybe to say a few more things and maybe to open it for questions. Yes, so 80% of all milestones were successfully completed. We thought that we executed really well against our roadmap. What adjustments did we make? So one of the things that we're very proud of is that we actually changed at the beginning of the year. We became like very focused on user feedback, and like we ended up having a very tight user feature prioritization. So everything we're prioritizing needs to come from interviews from users, and we're conducting many of those, both on the funders and on the recipients front. I know that Selby had a question about this, about us sharing some of those. So a lot of this information is private information. We're not asking for people to like permission to reshare that, but we feel that like if any of you want to be able to talk a little bit deeper about this, we have a whole log about when we met who, you know, the feedback that we collected and all of that. But yeah, so with regards to our roadmap, we did a few changes actually. We decided to prioritize KYC related work much earlier. So this is starting now, effectively in the next 2 weeks. And the reason why we did this is because we realized that for a number of funders, again, we have a funder focused strategy, KYC is a must, is not a nice to have. So they want to make sure that some of their recipients actually will be KYC'd before they receive their funds. So we're looking at integrating a solution for that, and we're researching existing solutions at the moment. So that's something that was not on our roadmap that we added. We also decided to deprioritize integrating with Radicle, as it didn't have a stable release yet, and we decided to deprioritize integrations with layer 2 networks. Challenges, we didn't face any crazy new challenge beyond the existing one, like designing, coding, and auditing the smart contracts is super hard. We actually, I think for the ones of you that have been following the project, we did a number of audits, we did a contest, we did we did a formal verification, type of style of audit. So this is, this was the complexity. We were a bit delayed, not crazy, but a bit delayed on shipping the contracts because of that. But eventually we end up shipping them in July 2023. So with regards to feedback, we have, as I said, we have collected a lot of feedback. Whoever wants to go down, like I'm mentioning a few names there because I feel comfortable sharing that, but we can go in detail. Yeah, okay, almost 10 minutes. Okay, cool. So that was, like mostly it for the retrospective from 2023. Should I move to the 2024 quickly or take questions now?
I think maybe move to the proposal first, and then we'll do questions all at the end.
Okay. So, cool. Okay, so moving to 2024, you can see my screen?
Yes.
Cool. So our purpose remains the same. Like the way I explain this right now is, of course, we're building DRIPS, which is a toolkit for funding free and open source software. Specifically, though, I think the thing that we want people to remember is that our current focus is on establishing dependency funding as a new norm within Web3 communities. This is success for us, right? And that's our strategy. We want to get a lot of orgs to actually fund their critical software dependencies with DRIPS. So with regards to the strategy, as I said, it remains funder focused, means that we prioritize the needs of funders with the goal to attract more funders and capital, and then to onboard more FOSS projects that claim those funds. I talked about the KPIs that we're starting to look at. Again, the most important at this point in time is which orgs we manage to onboard to fund the critical software dependencies, and how much value we manage to deposit on the protocol from them in order to fund their critical software dependencies. As I said, right now we have 2 organizations already funding their critical software dependencies, and then 1 more ready to be announced, and 1 more in really good stage. Our yearly objectives is to actually have 20 orgs by the end of 2024 that use DRIPS to fund their critical software dependencies, and $10 million deposited in the protocol. That's that. So what we're working on, we have a number of things that we're working on. I mentioned that we have already started looking into KYC, and we're looking at starting writing some code and integrating existing solutions really soon. We expect that this work will continue in Q1. The other thing that we're planning on introducing is this whole idea of multi-party drip list creation. If you remember, when we as a community did this, we had to do this on the forum. We learned quite a lot, and there are still more things to learn, but we want to productize this whole thing. We want a DAO to be able to use our tool to actually collectively decide which projects, which free and open source projects they want to fund and be able to do this on the tool in a more structured way versus the unstructured way that this thing happens today on forums. We want to scale the notifications of recipients. This is actually a much bigger problem that it appears. Even if you're giving money to people, this isn't so trivial today. Notifying someone and telling them that $10,000 dollars are waiting for you, still going from that to them claiming the funds, it's actually like still very, very messy. And for now, we're doing this manually, right? I think I mentioned this in another call, but we onboarding every recipient through a video call. And we're doing this simply because we want to explain them what we're doing. We want to build a relationship with them and we want to get their feedback. But of course, this doesn't scale. We want to have ways to scale this beyond us having to actually get on a video with them and show them how to do things. The other thing that we actually want to explore is to go beyond. In 2024, we want to test the idea of going beyond just funding your critical dependencies and try to experiment with some other ways that you can use the tool. One of the ways that we're quite excited about is the idea of partnering with a bunch of organizations, creating a list around the cause, and then creating a campaign around that. An example of that would be that we are actually already discussing with one organization the possibility of creating a security, like a drip list that is all about security researchers and projects within Web3, and then creating a campaign around that and having some of those organizations actually fund that list, right? And we want to test that concept. Security is one idea. Privacy is another idea that we really like, looking to do. We have identified that there's a gap in the market. There's no product right now that, let's say if you say I care about, privacy in Web3, or I care about privacy in a specific location, right? Like, who's doing interesting work there? It feels like there's an information problem there. No product is covering that. We want to test the waters and see if there's something interesting for us there. Moving a little bit quicker, we also want to migrate to Chainlink's decentralized Oracle network. There's a lot of technical nuance around that one. We're using already Chainlink oracles, right? But Chainlink now, finally is decentralizing its Oracle network. It's not depending on a few operators. So we want to move to that. And then the last two things I'll say is we want to lower the barrier of entry for claiming. Basically, this is a lot of work around account abstraction. Basically, you should be able to claim funds without even needing to have an Ethereum address, right? That's something that finally the ecosystem has matured there. We have been speaking with a project called Privy there that we think about integrating, and I can go more in detail if people have questions. And then the last thing actually is that we want to also experiment with going beyond DAOs. Right now, our focus and our conversations are mostly focused on DAOs, right? You have a big treasury, you're building public goods, you care about public goods. Well, let's actually help you fund your critical software dependencies through what we build. But something very interesting happened a few weeks ago where a big traditional Wall Street organization called Vanek decided to actually split 10% of their profits with something called Protocol Guild, which is effectively a collective of Ethereum core maintainers. And that opened our eyes a bit to the fact that there might be a possibility out there for traditional organizations. Either these are venture capitalists or these are, more traditional finance organizations, to potentially do good and support, the free and open source software projects that make their work or their profits possible. So that's that with regards to the roadmap. With regards to objectives, we are ready. We are in the market already. We're having a lot of conversations. So in Q1 already, we want to attract 5 new orgs that fund their critical software dependencies, and we have a goal to attract another 1 million in drips. As you can see, Q1 is slightly slower, but we want to ramp that amount up towards the end of the year. We want that to be 10 million, right? With regards to organizational structure, there is a Swiss association with a group of the core maintainers. With regards to contributors, there aren't that many changes. We only lost one contributor that decided to start his own company, actually, which is exciting. And then he's also reviewing code for us. So he's basically still around, but everyone else is still with the team. And then you will see some additions. We have a few people like Project Jasmine and Abby starting to actually also contribute in a number of different ways. About 17 minutes. Yes, I don't think I forgot anything crazy. I talked about success criteria. The total budget requested is 1.1 million, like based on the funds that we're returning from this year. So yeah, that's that. And I'll pause here.
Great. Thank you. Anybody? Abby, go right ahead.
Thanks so much for running that through. Maybe you mentioned this, but I just missed it. Do you have a baseline of where we currently stand in relation to the KPIs that you wrote out? I think I included this in the
yes.
proposal, but are you going to be able to get those on the forum or shared this week?
Yes. So right now, like I'll give you the short answer, and I know that you have asked a few things on the forum that I'm planning on replying. So the short answer is right now, like I mentioned the number of organizations. So we have 2 organizations already doing this, and then 1 already committed. And then 1 more in late conversations, in good conversations. So that's where we are with regards to organizations. And then with regards to value deposited on the protocol, right now this is $1.5 million is deposited on the protocol. So that's with regards to metrics, but also like one of the things that we have promised that actually it was a good reminder having to do this update in front of all of you was a Dune dashboard, right? Like, we actually have a number of Dune queries that we've had already written. We actually had an issue with Dune that they were not ingesting our data correctly, that, now they fixing and we are in communication with the team, but we're planning on sharing a dashboard on Dune that you will be able to monitor those metrics by Monday. So you can actually consider this on the Snapshot proposal. This is, high priority for us. Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, that would be great to say. And just one quick follow-up question with regards to marketing costs. I mean, maybe you can also just write this on the forum. So I also pinged it there. But in terms of marketing, how are you looking at your kind of like marketing initiatives over the next year?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what we're looking to do, so we have a budget that we're requesting effectively for marketing. We have an allocation of 325K. Over that, we're looking to bring on a marketing lead that is internal to the team. It's slightly a different setup to what we have right now. And we have allocated roughly 125K for that. And then on top of that, we have 200K effectively for marketing initiatives. We think that this is a good start, specifically to say what we're trying to do with marketing. Our marketing strategy is and remains very funder focused as well, very partnerships focused. We're not interested in playing the social media game so much. We want to do stuff on social media. I'll explain what we want to do, but here it's all about bringing funders that want to fund their critical software dependence and reverse engineering from that with regards to marketing activities. What that means is that there are 3 marketing activities that we really care about today. The one is basically creating awareness around drips. Still, a lot of people do not know about drips, and this is where social media, comes into play. So this is one area that we want to invest simply to create awareness. The second thing we care about is creating legitimacy. So we want, right now, we're still not on the table when people thinking about, Web3, public goods, free and open source software solutions. Drips is still, many times forgotten there. This is changing, right? Given that we are a new tool, but we want to build legitimacy. So awareness, social media, legitimacy, and we think that content creation is helping a lot with that. Yesterday, for instance, the Radworks team shared the case. This is helping a lot We're looking to do the exact same thing with Octant, for instance. We're looking also, like, we've been collecting testimonials for some of the builders. That's actually super nice and very motivating for both the team, but also the community, where builders are saying why they really love dependency funding, for instance, right? So there's that aspect of marketing, which is content creation. And then the third one is basically events and like in-depth, close, like deep engagements, effectively. So this is a lot of the work that Becca has been doing until now, but we want to be in events, not so much just like, just doing sponsorships and things like that. We could do a bit of that, but most importantly, organizing more intimate sessions with organizations that we know that care about public goods, and try to build the connections and try to get them to commit to actually fund their critical software dependencies. So it's these three things: awareness, legitimacy, and in like how deep engagement, I should say. And it's social media, content creation, and events.
I have one question.
Yes, please.
So I really like the kind of funnel of metrics that you have. I kind of think of it as like, you call it funding and recipient. You can think of it as like upstream and downstream metrics. These downstream ones, like recipient metrics, they seem kind of tricky to go after. For example, like someone might have funds that are available to collect, but how do we actually get people to know that those funds are there? Those metrics that are downstream seem a bit tricky. So I'm curious how you imagine we might go after those.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And like, let me actually scroll up to say a few words about this. I'm on the wrong tab. Give me a second. So the reason why you see this, I think you're spotting something which is, really on point. So as I said before, like for us right now, the most important metrics is 1 and 2. Without them, 3, 4, and 5 have no meaning, right? So like I want this to be understood. But I think the 2 metrics that you're calling out is specifically this percentage of like how much of that value that has been allocated by funders is collected by recipients, and basically like the percentage of projects that have claimed and also chose to split to their dependencies. So we put those 2 things, those 2 metrics there specifically because we understand that these are hard things to do, and important and hard things to do. And what I mean by that is that with regards, for instance, to the amount of the value collected by recipients, we understand that right now, like notifying recipients and getting them to claim those funds is something that is very clunky still. And that's why we said like, hey, let's actually we will be doing a lot of product work around that. Let's have a metric, put that metric basically at the high level so we can monitor how effective we are at doing those things. And then the objective number 4, this is something that it's also very hard to do, right? Like, how do you convince the builders that actually, many times needs 100% of the funds to potentially split, 10% of whatever they're receiving with more organizations? But we have engineered a product that makes this super easy. And this is a metric where both the product and our marketing initiatives will play a role. And we want it there because, if we will be successful, success for us means a new cultural norm, which is basically you don't have to overthink about staying with your dependencies. So both our product needs to support that and our marketing needs to support that. So we wanted to put this up front and say, well, if next year we see that only 5% of builders are doing this, probably something is not working there. So that's my answer about why those 2 things are there and what we're thinking about doing.
The number 4 makes total sense to me. It's I think there's a lot of game theory involved on this one, because someone might collect funds, but if they keep it all to themselves, they either look like they really need the money or they look like they don't like sharing money. So But I think number 3, if I had to rank them, number 3 looks like the hardest one.
Yeah, number 3 is very hard, given how basically the reason why number 3 is very hard is because it's crypto has a really bad reputation. So we're dealing with a lot of problems where people will say I don't want to claim the funds, crypto is scammy. I'm not going to claim. This is Ethereum stuff. I don't want to claim it. So we're hearing things like this, right? So, and that's what's hard about this. And also it's generally very hard to make sure that someone a person that is contributing to a project actually is aware that there's this money coming in. We've been opening GitHub issues, and we've been sending emails, and we've been sending messages, but basically productizing and scaling this is actually very non-trivial. So you're right on that, but we still want to see how well we can do, and what moves the needle here, and that's why that metric is there.
I unfortunately have to interject here, although this is a very, very good discussion and very good points being brought up right now. We are already very behind schedule. We're on minute 27 of this proposal alone, so we're gonna have to move on, unfortunately. Thank you so much, LA, for the presentation and the discussion here. Please continue, or if you have questions, please feel free to drop them also on the proposal. Next, we will move on to the grants org. So Boredom, you can hop right back on your mic there, and you can take it away.
Great. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll start with the retrospective. Hopefully this is, we're not a core development team, but we do have a lot of work to cover, so I'll try to make this quick. So going over the retrospective, we had, I'll just kind of go through the KPIs that we had. One general theme was recruiting. The idea behind this was we wanted to bring at least one team closer to working with one of the core teams, and a stretch goal was getting two plus teams, just grantees to come on board and really tightly connected with one of the core teams. So in terms of getting one team on board, we were successful here. The work that Yorgos has been leading, they're in Zulip every day with the Radicle core team. They're contributing, they're asking questions, they're answering questions. They're really deep in the work with that team. So I marked that one as successful. The stretch goal, not successful, because we haven't quite got a team that's as dialed in as Yorgos's is. The next is dog fooding. So we keep these ones pretty simple. We basically just always try to reach for like 100% of our grants being paid out via drips. So we were successful on this. Since the launch of Drips V2, 100% of our grants have been funded through Drips. And I've got the link here if you want to look at everything that's streaming right now. Then we also wanted to make sure that 100% of grantees are using Radicle to save their work and collaborate. Somewhat successful. So most of the work that's been development work has been with Yorgos's team, and they've got some percentage of their work on Radicle. So this one was somewhat successful. They are moving over. They are moving their work more and more over to Radicle. So our hope here is just to make sure that grantees, when they're working on development work, anything that's touching code, that they're really dog fooding the stuff that our teams are building. The next was we wanted to make sure that the grants is dripping to our own dependencies. So for example, we depend heavily on Gnosis Safe, Snapshot, just basic kind of governance protocols that help us run grants. So we were successful just by virtue of us taking part in the broader Radworks, that $1 million USDC that went out. So we were successful there by just participating in that. Another idea that kind of came about last year was getting more community input into grants. This one we weren't successful with. I have a lot more details in this link here, but the gist was there's a few conversations we had with groups like Gitcoin who had built out something called a round manager, which would allow for quadratic voting. So the idea there was maybe we could integrate with them and let communities of people basically vote on which projects would get funding. This wasn't successful for a number of reasons. A lot of it was timing. They hadn't launched their product till after ECC, and by that point, most of our budget was pretty much spoken for, so we didn't really have a lot of budget to work with. So we might pick up these conversations next year, but that doesn't seem like it's a huge priority for us. So that's 2023. Does anyone have any questions about that? No. Okay. I'll jump over to the proposal of 2024. First off, thanks everyone for the awesome feedback. I believe I've answered all the questions that were asked, and I have added some rewrites. There are some outstanding questions, especially from LA, around kind of where exactly is the budget going to fall. So I'm going to go through this kind of as it's written. But I think if any questions or discussion come out of this, I hope it mostly we can work on clearing up some of like sort of how we're going to allocate all of the budget here. I think most of it is in my head making sense. So we started with kind of we have, with the work that we've been doing with Yorgos over the past year, we have a very clear vision for how we want grants to fund work that's sort of on the periphery of one of our core teams. And given that that is in a steady state, we've rewritten the purpose to start moving towards the direction of broader free and open source software funding. And so the strategy and roadmap basically covers integrations and tooling, which is the work that Yorgos's team is leading, and this broader topic of free and open source software, which right now is fairly nebulous, but it could be something like Hardhat, Etherscan, those types of Web3 tooling, or it could be something that's not Web3 related at all, but could be some core open source software that a lot of people depend on, things like curl, Git itself, homebrew, tor, and those types of projects. So let's see here. So in terms of the integration and tooling, this bit of the budget is pretty much, actually I'll start with this slide down here. The general idea with this work is on one hand, it's basically just making sure that when people come and try to integrate Radicle into their existing workflows, basically just making sure that they don't see any gaps. And so we know that when people write their code, they write their code in an IDE. We know that when people, so we need IDE plugins. We know that when people want to save and collaborate, they need to use a Git protocol, which is the core team's work building out Radicle. We also know that whenever someone is working on a code base, they want to be able to have clear communications on what changes are being made, who's making the changes, and get some sort of notification or some sort of messaging around what is the team working on. And that's where this messaging piece comes in. And then another key component to developing software is being able to test and build it in an automated fashion and in a way that provides feedback on whether or not there's any breaking changes, and just making sure that the development process is as smooth as possible. So this work is really looking at, like, if we imagine Radicle launching in early next year without any of these things present, how much harder will it be to onboard new users? And how much harder will it be to get any feedback at all? And for anyone who is developing software, they're pretty much no-brainers. We know that people write their code in IDEs, and we know that they need to test their software and build it, and then have things like CI and CD. So that's kind of the mental framework for the integration and tooling work, and then the remainder of the budget is mostly geared towards free and open source software. And so the breakdown that we're looking at for right now is for IDE plugins, getting that ready for launch for version 1.0, various messaging integrations across popular things like Zulip, Slack, Discord, and CI and CD integrations, as well as building out more migration tools to help people onboard to Radicle. All of this encapsulates basically user acquisition. We're trying to make sure that when people come to Radicle, they feel comfortable they feel like it's going to work, and it works with all of their existing tools. And so we see this as really a linchpin in being able to go to market. And the budget for that, we're looking for 680,000 USDC. And then the overall budget for free and open source software, we're looking at 250,000 USDC. Again, as I said, some of the open discussion is around kind of tweaking the number here for free and open source software, which I'm open to, but that's where the numbers are at for right now. I'll go down to kind of basically current members. So right now we have Abby's on the on our committee. There's me. We have a recent application from Jenny, who's ex-Numia co-founder. That one's tentative. We still have to vote on it. We have Nader, who works with Aave and Lens, and he also founded DevDAO, and Nas, who used to work with Radworks as well as Gnosis Safe. The responsibilities have not really changed. I think if you've seen our process, it's very transparent. It's pretty clear what we're doing. We basically review applications. We make sure that the milestones are delivered, and all of our voting is public and open and takes place on our Gnosis Safe. So let's go into the reporting and success criteria. So some of this has changed and some of this hasn't from last year. So in terms of free and open source software grants, we basically want to measure the contribution growth. So if we were to fund an open source project, we would want to go into looking at how many contributors there are in their project and make sure that the funding that we provide is helping them build their base of contributors. Follow-on funding. If we fund a group, we don't want to be the only ones funding them. We want to make sure that they're building something valuable that can be self-sustaining and build traction to gain more funding. The other thing, which is would require a bit of analysis on our side, is measuring the diversity of projects. So this would come down to categorizing things, kind of like what LA was alluding to earlier. Is this a security project? Is this a privacy project? You know, what kind of project are we funding, and making sure that we have a good amount of diversity in the types of projects we're funding. The way I've broken out the metrics for grants here is there's operational, which are the ones I just listed, as well as technical. So when we would fund someone who is some general open source project, we'd want to onboard 100% of them to get paid via drips. We'd want to onboard 100% of them to split their incoming drips, and we'd want to onboard 100% of them to use Radicle for any development work. And the reason for putting 100% is I think it's an ambitious number, but also it's good because then whenever we figure out where we're not reaching that number, we can ask ourselves, why aren't we reaching that? Like, do they need KYC and that's not ready for drips yet, so we have to use some other mechanism? Those kinds of things, just be able to collect that feedback from groups that we fund. For integration and tooling, the technical goals here are pretty simple. Basically, 100% of milestones are delivered. So that means if a milestone involves some piece of software being built, it just means the software is, written, tested, and running as expected. Operationally, we want to make sure that there's user testing, that we're getting feedback from users, and again, making sure that we're utilizing drips to pay out grantees, and then making sure that 100% of the code is delivered via Radicle. That is it. I think the rest of the proposals is just details on how we're managing funds, which hasn't changed since last year. Does anyone have any questions?
Yep, I think LA does.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you for the overview and for the proposal. I've left a few questions on the forum, which I know that you have like replied, and the replies make sense. I just wanted to maybe just bring up. I have three points or three
Yeah.
questions, I guess. So the the first, like if we break down the work into, you know, what you call like the force work versus the integrations work, and then yeah, like if we take these two categories, I think with the integrations work, like I'm 100% behind the work. My point on the forum and my question here is that if the timing is right, and what I mean by that is that, like, the way I personally look at this exercise is that, you know, okay, like, you know, we have a pool of dollars here, and then we need to deploy them at the right time, at the right, you know, piece of work, right? And the point I had on the forum was that, like, hey, I understand, I buy the strategy. I'm convinced with the strategy. My only thinking was that, like, hey, like, for instance, you know, what if we start like actually like, you know, like investing on this now, and then Radicle 1.0 is delayed, right? Or like, you know, what if we figure out after Radicle 1.0 is out that, you know, some of the needs, like, you know, some of our users are actually skewing heavily into certain tools, and then just focusing on those will actually, you know, capture 90% of the market. And there's no point for us to actually, like, you know, at this point, the return on our investment, like, if we, let's say, integrate Slack, and like none of the hardcore privacy people are using Slack, for instance, right? Like what about that, right? So my first point with regards to integrations work is that, like, I felt that the budget requested feels a bit too high at this moment in time. So maybe, like, I would say, maybe we try to stage it somehow, like start with a smaller amount, and then the moment Radical 1.0 is out, we have some more users, we do some user testing, and then we actually, you know, scale the capital. So that's one suggestion. I guess that's not the question. With regards to the second category, which is the force budget, to me, this still feels really fuzzy with regards to what are we trying to learn there. Because if you think about, like, you know, us funding our own, like funding open source software, we have already, like, now allocated a significant amount of funding to our critical software dependencies. So my question to you is that, how is that different from that? And then the third question I have, which for something different, is that with the exception of you and Abby, and of course with Jenny, which, like, you know, Jenny is now, she might join that committee. The two other members haven't been so vocal or active in this community. Is this an issue? Do you care about this, or do they have to be, or not? And I shouldn't care about this as long as they're reviewing work, for instance.
Yeah. So let me go to the first one. So in terms of the integration and tooling, one idea is you know, this is 680,000 USDC. It's not like we're going to send it away on January 1st. It is something that we could do on a quarterly basis and say, you know, basically split that down into 4 pieces and say, here is what we'll do for Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. So I think there's always I just think, I think that the main thing that I think is that, like, these are all kind of based on what we know about IDEs that people use, or CI/CD tooling that people use. For example, Jenkins. Like, these are all things that we know have most of the market share out there. So that's kind of where this is coming from in terms of, like, how do we know what we'll probably go after early on, is based on just looking it up and just saying this is what the market share is out there. This is what most people are using. So that, I think that maybe helps explain, like, why we're going after, you know, things like JetBrains or VS Code, Jenkins. That's where that's coming from, and as well as the migration. I mean, most people are on GitHub, so the first migration tool we have is GitHub to Radicle, and then we will follow up with things like GitLab and others. So that's kind of where the thinking is on that. In terms of the overall budget, I think yeah, I think it's the question of whether or not Radicle V1 will be available. I can't answer that question. But I know that if I make the assumption, if I'm working as, if we're working as the grants org and saying, well, we are dependent on that. If I make the assumption that it will be ready in time, how can I put us in the best possible position to onboard users? And I still think with that assumption in mind, like these are the things we want to go after. But I actually don't, I think I'm kind of, I can answer that question probably as well as you can, as to whether or not that dependency is going to be ready.
That makes sense, yes. And I think like a solution potentially, as you're saying, like scaling the capital potentially later after, like, be more conservative before 1.0 is out, and then, start potentially scaling the capital after 1.0 is out. Maybe that's a way to navigate that.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing to consider is like we're like managing like a team of people working on this. It's not it's one thing to say like scaling capital, but scaling people is much more difficult. So, telling someone, hey, can you do like 5 hours of work for the first 3 years, or 5 hours a week of work for the first 3 months of the year, and then all of a sudden I might want you in April, maybe, but I'm not sure. Like that, that kind of relationship is a bit tricky to. It's like one thing to scale capital, and it's like another thing to scale people, and that's kind of where I think it's hard. So I
hear you.
Yeah, I just think and then your point about the members on the committee, yeah. So I'll be really open on this. So yeah, I'm definitely the most active person. I'm basically managing I manage kind of the application process, getting votes started. Abby's in there joining in on discussions. We will be removing people who we do have some committee members on the Gnosis Safe right now. I've actually put in a stipulation. Actually, I'm not going to bother trying to find it here, but I'll just say it. We have a stipulation that if someone doesn't come to our stand-ups on a regular basis, or if they're not voting on a regular basis, then they basically they can be removed kind of at will. So we'll have a rule in place to make sure that there's some enforcement in terms of engagement. But yeah, so it's basically me, Abby, Nader, who's with Avi and Lens. His voting record is actually very solid, and he has been very he's been very useful because he's a kind of a DevRel type of guy, and so he has a lot of knowledge about IDs and these sort of things. So he has been very very impactful in terms of these the last year of grants. Nas has been voting somewhat consistently, but yeah, he's definitely lower on that list of people. Yeah, so that's why I put that stipulation in to help us actually enforce that.
Makes sense. Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Yeah. But with that said, by the way, if we do remove people, obviously that means spots open up. And so if you know anyone who you think might be interested, feel free to send them my way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe we'll take one more question from Abby, and then we'll move on to the foundation org proposal.
Cool. Awesome. So yeah, just quick brief comment first. Boredom, I have not dropped my comments on your proposal yet, but I promise I will be doing that as well. So I will follow up with more comments, but I just wanted to touch on two things. First, with the integrations and tooling, I agree with LA's feedback that we need to, just for sake of most productively using people's time and capital effectively, we really need to make sure that all of the integration and tooling work that's specifically spec'd out here is closely is just really in touch and in line with Radicle's roadmap. I mean, as we saw even from, I really wish Alexi was here to provide comments, but I guess he had to drop early. But I think that it's important to look at the budget that's going into Radicle specific integrations and tooling holistically in line with the Radicle budget, and make sure that the way that these funds are being deployed happen in line with their roadmap and the completion of their roadmap to best support that work. So I'll expand on my thoughts there and kind of like potential solutions for how we can manage that work in my response on the forum. You know, this could be the time to start thinking about if grants make sense to, you know, do on a quarterly basis, you know, or on a biannual basis to specifically like relate more to tying the grants more to individual orgs roadmaps and so on. So that's like my first comment. I'll expand on that more in my response. And then the second comment is on FOSS. I think personally, coming from the grants committee, I think the value of having a category dedicated to FOSS is that it allows us to we're in a place where we can't fund so many new technologies beyond Radicle and Drips and the capacity that we fund Radicle and Drips, right? Since our priority is finding PMF. This section of the grants budget is our potential for continuing to validate and expand on our purpose of funding new censorship-resistant permissionless technologies. In my opinion, without taking away from you know, our path to product market fit for Radicle and Drip specifically. It's kind of like this opportunity for us to put our money where our mouth is. Of course, like us funding our dependencies was like our big attempt at that. I do think that a budget, you know, close to what's allocated here is a good opportunity to continue growing our ecosystem, validating our role in the ecosystem, which I think supports the development and the adoption of Radicle and Drips respectively as well. I expanded on this in my response to some comments on the Foundation org proposal, in that like supporting the brand and validating the intentions of Radworks supports its ecosystem as a whole. And so I actually think that, for example, funding a couple really core, awesome FOSS projects via grants will help people get over the anti-crypto narratives that kind of like plague the Radicle brand, for example. So instead of being a DAO that funds, you know, this piece of peer-to-peer tech, it's, you know, a legitimate organization that understands, you know, how to fund FOSS and what needs to happen, and actually has a grants program that's kind of doing it. So I agree. So I'll add a lot of more comments, Boredom, just on budget and scoping here. But I'm supportive of like having like a 2-category, you know, grants org. And I just want to make sure that anybody who's building integrations and tooling are going to be able to do so effectively and in line with the work of the orgs themselves. So that's all I'll say, and I'll continue on the forum. I urge everybody to, participate on the forum as they can. Can everybody see my screen? I need a verbal confirmation.
Yes.
Okay, great. Hopefully the bandwidth holds up. So I will briefly start with the retrospective. I will not be able to get into as much detail as the other orgs, since this retrospective covers the work of like 3 different committees over the last year, but I'll try to cover the highlights. So the Better Internet Foundation, which as of this year, as of last year, was known as the Radicle Foundation. We just changed the name, obviously has a purpose of supporting the development of resilient humane software infrastructures, and is a supporter of the Radworks ecosystem. And so in 23, this support work that the foundation did for the Radworks ecosystem was to manage Drips and Radicle development through April 2023, support the transition of Drips and Radicle development outside of the foundation and into the Treasury, stewarding the evolution of the Radworks ecosystem alongside of its community by investing in community governance and marketing resources, and maintaining the integrity of the legitimate foundation's operations. So the Swiss Foundation, not just the foundation org. So basically like the biggest milestone was that we completed the transition from to the DAO, is how we kind of called it. In that the foundation now no longer coordinates the strategy, development, or work of Drips and Radicle development. This is like a really huge win. It made the project entirely DAO funded, the foundation itself included in that, and marked like a major milestone in our decentralization roadmap. So that was kind of like the biggest accomplishment. Again, I won't focus too much on each of these. You can go through and read them, especially because I am not, I'm only a lead of one of these committees, but The ops team, their main focus was transitioning Drips and Radicle into their own orgs operationally, and setting up the organizational model and the scaffolding required to support this organizational model that we all transitioned to, and doing anything from contributor agreements to setting up operations and processes for budgeting, financial reporting, and everything. Orgs has been like instrumental in supporting the transparency of orgs' use of Radworks grants and funds. And contributors like Yuval have stepped up and been able to really, just like totally improve and evolve the way that we report and manage finances within the entire ecosystem. So that's been awesome. This transition is continuing to be in process, and the ops committee has been working on like budget templates, making reporting easier, and providing more hands-on support, so orgs can think a little bit more critically about what ops processes they want to introduce in their newly formed orgs. As I said, they also support Radworks community with monthly finance reports, and continue to coordinate our work with our legal partners to manage trademarks, explore different legal topics on behalf of the Radworks team, and foundation health. Also just like managing the health of the foundation, the bookkeeping, the way it works, and so on. So yeah, I won't get into those details due to time. So moving on to the governance team. So the governance committee supported the foundation's 3 initiatives in 23 with org support, DAO support, org support and DAO support. The org support is stewarding the governance processes between orgs and the greater DAO with facilitation, documentation, and communication, and prioritizing and project managing community-led initiatives that strengthen the resilience of the DAO, including but not limited to decentralization efforts, treasury management, mechanism design, and research. So again, the most significant accomplishment of the governance committee was completing our transition to the DAO, and as was, the foundation orgs as a whole, but also supporting our collective evolution into what we know as Radworks. As we know, at the beginning of the year, this DAO was called the Radicle DAO, and in light of the brand and organizational evolution that we went through in Q1 of last year, there was a need to evolve the DAO's brand and the DAO's purpose into something different to reconcile and resolve the conflicts that arise from Radicle and Drip spinning out into their own independent orgs. So mainly we are able to, under these 2 major themes of work, we were able to complete most of our priority objectives. The 2 that we were blocked on, and this post has like all of the kind of individual accomplishments. The 2 that we were blocked on and are still continuing to work on are our treasury management strategy. We had a goal to source and orient an expert to coordinate our DAO's treasury diversification and management. We've done so much research, facilitated so many conversations into this, but ultimately, it's been really tough to figure out when is the right time to embark on this like treasury management journey, especially since it's like such a wild west in terms of like regulatory concerns, and just in general, like the service providers that we have. And a lot of this work into treasury management triggered most of this strategy work that we completed over the last year. So that's been expanded on in the new proposal. So you can go to that to kind of read more about how we're navigating that, and later in this retrospective. And then the second, which is kind of like a continuous objective, is to develop a mission-aligned approach, strategy, and recommendation for evolving ecosystem governance. This objective, again, in pursuit of completing this objective, it triggered a ton of work that we had to do to define Radworks' relationships with its orgs, to further define what Radworks is, why it exists, how long it's going to exist, and what's its long-term plans for sustainability. And yeah, so basically the TLDR is that us not being able to complete these objectives is directly impacting the objectives that we've created for 24 with the formation of the strategy and governance committees. So I'll expand more on that when I review the proposal. And here you can see more context on why this work wasn't able to be completed in more detail. So the biggest challenge that we went through is that I think governance constantly was floating between acting as, leading strategy for Radworks while also leading governance. And so alongside of the formation of Radworks, the main challenge was managing the resulting organizational development, support, and facilitation work that surfaced throughout the course of the year. And so we embarked on a bunch of this work. We conducted a treasury runway analysis. We facilitated workshops on Radworks sustainability. We facilitated workshops with org leads on their own sustainability models, and we even developed these MOU documents that we thought were a really great way to be transparent and to better define what each individual org's path to product market fit is. And so this work is truly strategy. It's actually not governance at the end of the day. And so it fell into the hands of our team because all of this strategy work is necessary to address before actually developing a mission-aligned approach, strategy, and recommendation for evolving ecosystem governance. So leaning into this work kind of limited our ability to execute completely on our governance objectives, but it also provided us much needed clarity and direction for our own work. So as I'll touch on in the new proposal, this strategy work will be transitioning to the newly formed strategy committee led by myself, Julian, who has been a long-term contributor, who's now getting back in the saddle, and Camille, who was leading the apiary team, who I'm sure everybody has seen throughout the community. So just checking on time. And I touched on treasury management and kind of the things there, but I'll just keep moving along to keep things going. So in terms of marketing, the marketing committee's purpose is to create awareness, generate interest, and drive demand among the target audiences for 3 primary clients, Radworks, Strips, and the Radicle org. So again, huge milestone for the foundation org as a whole, and also for marketing committee, was to really coordinate the launch and birth of Radworks and everything that comes along with it, as well as a new brand, a brand guide, a website, new documents, announcement materials. There was a ton of resources that came together, and a lot of marketing strategy that went into defining what the positioning and core messaging is of Radworks as well. Marketing also successfully planned, managed, and executed the coordination of in-person and online events and sponsorships for Radworks, Strips, and Radicle. We held successful activations at Berlin Blockchain Week, ECC in Paris, ETH Denver. We're currently in Dev Connect in Istanbul, and the Drips team is actually heading to Taipei Blockchain Week in December. The marketing team managed to, coordinate 3 different marketing strategies, which was, I think, not what everybody signed up for, and they did it really well. And so we're excited to see where that goes in 24. And in addition to this, they set up distribution channels to leverage DAO-wide and org-specific marketing campaigns, like new social channels, new website domains, mirror blogs, and formulated a brand and messaging framework for the Radicle DAO, now as Radworks, based off of its new purpose. So that's been really great, and I think was kind of like the cherry on top for this brand evolution, is that now I feel like Radworks has like a really strong foundation for its brand and its narrative moving forward, and tons of amazing boilerplates, messaging frameworks, images, graphics that we can use to kind of continue supporting the Radworks purpose and vision. So I won't dive into this too much. If you have questions on the challenges that went behind marketing, you can kind of maybe chime in either in the chat, because Sean is here, I think, on the call, or chime in on the forum. But I think that there was a couple of ongoing responsibilities that saw less progress than expected for good reason, which is, because of managing basically the shifting tides of our marketing strategy with 3 orgs in place. And so, developing competitive landscapes, marketing strategies, target audience profiles is definitely probably going to happen more this year as the orgs move more into this like go-to-market, finding product market fit focus. Delivering market feedback back to Drips and Radicle, I think, was done ad hoc and isn't fully operationalized, but the marketing team has done like a lot of initial work with Drips in progress. So the big update here is that moving forward, marketing contributors won't exist as a separate committee as they did in last year within the foundation org. Instead, each org will maintain their own marketing budget, which will be scoped and has been scoped directly with Sean and other marketing contributors. This change corresponds to the transition of Radicle and Drips outside of the foundation. Now each org coordinates their own marketing, and the foundation org will have its own marketing objectives related to the marketing of the Better Internet Foundation and the marketing of Radworks that will be managed under the Radworks Strategy Committee. So I won't pause for questions here because I really just want to make sure that I can get through the proposal, but feel free to drop them in the chat and then I can answer them after. So moving into 24, 23 was an amazing year. We established Radworks. We rebranded the foundation.
One sec, you're not sharing your screen anymore. I don't know if you know.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know how that happened. I was sharing it. It just
it's an easy fix. I just wanted to let you know.
Now?
It's loading. Yes. Thank you.
Great. So moving into 24, there's a lot to cover here. So I am not sure. I think I'll give it 10 minutes and then we can call it to make sure that everybody gets their time back. But so moving into 24, as I was saying, we're in a really great place. We've evolved what was known as the Radicle project into what we know now as Radworks. We've supported the successful spinning out of Radicle and Drips into their own separate orgs. And we have identified a collective purpose in which we now operate under and are further refining the foundation's purpose in the Radworks ecosystem and the role that it plays for its orgs and for the FOSS ecosystem as a whole. So the biggest change is that, as I mentioned before, is that the Radicle Foundation has since renamed itself to the Better Internet Foundation, which not only resolved the conflicts that we saw with the brand change, but also is just way more compatible with the foundation's purpose, which more accurately reflects its larger vision for promoting and protecting internet technologies. And so the foundation is requesting funding from Radworks with the intention of serving 3 roles for the Radworks ecosystem and for the FOSS ecosystem at large. The first is to be a protector. So the foundation supports legal strategy, ensures operational and financial health, and promotes transparency within the Radworks ecosystem. This can be through operational work. This can be through, legal work. But the goal is to be a protector and a steward of the Radworks ecosystem and support its emergence and its growth. It's also a nurturer, so it incubates proposals and research to mature Radworks' decentralized governance system while also maintaining documentation, improving governance processes, and establishing best practices for the ecosystem. And finally, it's an advocate, and this is, I think, would be kind of the newer role that I think the foundation is looking to evolve into, in that the foundation truly wants to be an advocate for resilient and humane software infrastructures and aims to build networks of individuals, initiatives, and organizations that can educate and push the technical and cultural adoption of not only Radicle and Drips, but general censorship resistant and permissionless technologies as a whole. And so we're pretty excited about expanding the role of the foundation into this advocacy role, as we think it's a really important thing to do, not only for Radicle and Drips, but for the greater ecosystem. So the work of the foundation will be structured into 3 committees, as it was last year: the Operations Committee, the Radworks Strategy Committee, and the Radworks Governance Support Committee, with the Strategy Committee being called Strategy and Governance being referred to as Governance. The last 2 committees, they're specific to Radworks because the work that these committees is doing is in support of Radworks and in line with the grant being requested from Radworks. And as you know, these committees are basically, bodies of suppliers that have control over their own budget and have their own objectives, with the council kind of, managing everything on the level. So I'll start with also a new thing is that the Foundation Council is actually kind of going to have a set of objectives that it's going to hold itself to throughout the next year. The council retains overall responsibility for the Foundation's operations opportunities and strategy. And some of its objectives include, drafting an annual activity and financial report on the foundation's work for the Radworks ecosystem, revamping the foundation's website. And when I say revamp, this is not a redesign. This is just updating the name, updating the links, and just like making sure that its relationship with Radworks is clarified and understood. This is also, the biggest chunk of this work is identifying opportunities for the foundation to have an impact as an advocate in the role that I had just described. So we really want to see the Better Internet Foundation build a new network of individuals, organizations, and institutions that are purpose aligned and can help us pave the way for future advocacy and research partnerships. So it's basically kind of like testing our pitch with this network, and in order to refine the foundation's priorities and intentions in years to come, and leveraging this network to identify users to test and provide feedback for Radicle, Drips, and other Radworks supported technologies. We hope that we'll see some awesome sponsorship opportunities, workshops, initiatives on from this. We aren't dedicating so much budget to this, but it is a highlight that we just want to start basically kind of rubbing elbows with people who are already doing this work and building a better internet. What are the institutions that are out there, and how can we form relationships with them to start growing our own reputation? There's a potential hire on the horizon, which is the strategic financial partner manager, which is a big, aspect of Radworks support. We're looking to migrate and maintain our foundation and Radworks stocks on Radicle, and of course work on, our 2025 grant proposals. So I'll skip through responsibilities in an effort of time, but you can take a look in the proposal and drop comments in the forum. The operations committee is again driving transparency standards with best practices and financial reporting, and contributing to the legal strategy and defense across the Radworks ecosystem. So ops is really supporting not only this nurturer role, but also this protector role. The operations is responsible for maintaining foundation health, our financial reports, our activity reports, and again, supporting the onboarding of our foundation to Radicle itself, so we can all migrate to version controlled, decentralized hosting of our documentation. And for the Radworks ecosystem, the ops team is developing processes and resources for org's expense payments, financial reporting, and subscription policies. They're looking into researching, designing, and proposing a small legal defense fund to protect Radworks, its orgs, and its participants. And it's working with different partners to clarify and form regulatory definitions and guidelines for decentralization, and working on a bunch of different documentation for Radworks contributors to basically just kind of like operationalize the whole system that we have and make it easier for Radworks to onboard contributors, but also work with contributors throughout the ecosystem. And then work with the governance committee to design and improve the way that we pay out to orgs, thinking about how we can basically introduce better funding mechanisms between Radworks and its orgs, and then working with the strategy committee to facilitate legal support and consultancy that they need to accomplish their objectives related to Radworks sustainability, treasury management, and power distribution. I will also skip through the responsibilities. So moving on to the newly formed strategy committee. So a lot of people are like, what is strategy, for Radworks? Well, the strategy committee is to really support the development of Radworks as a whole by incubating community proposals that enable Radworks to fulfill its purpose of funding new, resilient, permissionless technologies, achieve self-sustainability, and steward mission-aligned guidance. So this is really continuing and building off of the strategy work that the governance committee took on in 23 to provide more definition, clarity, and guidance for the Radworks community moving forward into years to come. And so there's a couple large objectives here, also tons of comments that dive into the context and reasoning behind these objectives. So again, I'll just briefly go through them. But the first one is to define the Radworks vision. So we have a purpose, which is why we're doing what we're doing. And now it's time to define our vision and our mission. Our vision is where are we going? And our mission is how are we going to get there? And so this is probably will take a shape in the form of one or many documents. But the goal here is to paint a bigger picture about where Radworks is going with its purpose, how it wants to evolve and over what timeline, in an effort to more clearly define our work moving forward in our relationship with our orgs. The next one is to identify and validate a sustainability model for Radworks. It's basically answering the question of how Radworks should be setting itself up in the long term. You know, Radworks funds, Radicle and Drips. What does that mean for Radicle and Drips? How is Radicle and Drips looking at their long-term sustainability, and how does this impact Radworks' long-term sustainability? And over what timeline should we be planning for? The goal here is to spend active time with this strike team that we've assembled to workshop potential sustainability models and facilitate discussions with relevant stakeholders, with the goal of coming out with like a very actionable potential paths for the Radworks community coming out of 2024. And this will be done not only alongside of the ops team to coordinate legal work.
Abby, you cut audio for a bit, or I don't know if that was just me. Oh, she's gone. I'm sure she'll be back in a second. We're almost there, folks. We're so close. Thanks for sticking around. You guys are the real rock stars. See if she says anything here.
The Wi-Fi was bad when we were there yesterday, to be fair.
Yeah.
At the hotel.
Okay, thank you, Ellie. No worries. 2 hours is a long commitment. I appreciate everybody still being here. Yeah, maybe then while we wait, I had a few closing remarks that I can maybe try to do now, and then when Abby gets back on, she can finish her proposal. Yeah, so thank you, everyone. I'll say thank you again at the very end, but thank you, everyone, for joining today. Thank you, everyone, to all the proposal authors who prepared these wonderful proposals. And also, I want to extend the thank you to the org contributors themselves, because I know there was also some input from different contributors, not only in the creation of the proposals, but also of answering questions on the forum and being really supportive there. So huge shout out to everyone who had a hand in making this whole discussion happen. A few call outs or requests to proposal authors. I would like to ask all of the proposal authors to please address any of the open questions or comments on the proposals. There were actually quite a few, especially the clarification questions or points that came up regarding, there were a few specific things around timeline and a few proposals, KPI specifications, and also some open budget detail questions that I know a few folks had. And if you would please also include all of that information in the formal review version of your proposal, that would be extremely helpful for everyone, just so we have all of that information in one place. And then a question for the community would also be, or call out for the community would to please read the proposals if you have time, even just skimming them and skimming some of the discussions that have already been going on there, and asking questions, providing feedback.
Hey,
there she is.
Did I get kicked off?
No, you dropped. Your audio dropped, and then you dropped for like the last 2 minutes.
I think it was my Wi-Fi. Sorry. I think it was the last 2. Where did I get? I was just talking to myself for the last 2 minutes.
Oh no.
Yeah. So where was I?
Oh no. I think you were still you were towards the end of the strategy committee.
Okay. Did I talk about the responsibilities, or was I on the last objective?
You were in the middle of the responsibilities, I think.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so I think the main TLDR point that I was saying, just to wrap this up, was that the strategy committee will be like an accountability partner on behalf of Radworks and be working very closely with orgs in pursuit of their MOUs and the strategies outlined in their MOUs, so that by the end of the year, not only the orgs have clarity on their progress towards product market fit, but the Radworks community does as well. So yeah, but again, lots more in the comments. So finally, we can wrap up with the Governance Support Committee. So the Governance Support Committee is responsible for incubating proposals and research to mature Radworks' governance system. And so its main objectives are to, this is the shared forming within the Radworks community, and that's the ability to distribute non-financial governance power, would be referred to as influence. This work has been touched on before. But we like to onboard a new set of governance participants with the support of the strategy committee and actually
Abby, your audio keeps cutting also for bigger chunks at a time. I can, if you want, I can also take over just briefly for this part. Yeah, okay, so it's not just me. Okay, Abby, if you're speaking, we can't hear you right now. But yeah, so where did she leave off? Yeah, increasing diversity of token holders and votable supply. I think she was specifically just mentioning the point of onboarding a new set of governance participants with the support of the strategy committee. Really trying to figure out, you know, who, like, trying to get some really active participants and figuring out exactly what incentivizes them and motivates them, and to get them to participate also. And sorry, I have to the screen went away, so give me a second. And I'll just keep it really high level with the rest of these. So increasing engagement and participation across the board, refine Radworks governance process for the 2025 proposal cycle. So already looking ahead to beyond next year, trying to figure out how we can rethink budget disbursements, requirements and expectations for orgs, and also proposal templates, and formalizing a governance risk management process. So this is something we've actually already been working on for a while. Just creating or looking at different ways that we can become more vigilant and assess potential, like what our current governance landscape is, and also better assess potential attacks and what would be needed or required to have an attack on our governance and on our treasury. So that's something we've been working on for a while, and we plan to continue working on in early 2024, and hopefully we'll be able to share more about that in early 2024. Yeah, incubate an initial treasury management strategy. This is also, as Abby mentioned, will be in coordination with the strategy committee, just to really start thinking about the sustainability of Radworks. How can we continue to fund not only Radicle and Drips and the other existing orgs, but how can we, you know, fund potentially other technologies going forward, and grow the ecosystem. This isn't really something we've talked a ton about on the forum yet, so this will be a really great discussion and topic to start touching on more broadly with the community this year, because yeah, it's an important one. I'm going to skip responsibilities and everything for now. Contributors, I think Abby, no, I don't think she actually mentioned, but Foundation Council is Abby, Alexi, and Angie. The Operations Committee, we have Sally, Yuval, Wendy, and Angie. The Radworks Governance Support Committee, Abby and myself, and Apiary has also has been our spirit guide through a lot of governance thinking and work as well, and they will continue to have that role going forward in certain cases. And then the strategy committee will be Abby, Julian, and Camille. Oh, sorry, I guess I could have shared my screen. Anyway, yeah, so I'm going to skip most of the rest of this. I'll briefly touch on reporting and success criteria. Accountability is a key motivation for the foundation's work. As you might have already noticed from some of the initiatives that Abby had mentioned before, there's a lot of actions and initiatives to show transparency with all of the reporting, annual, quarterly, even monthly, with from the ops team. They do wonderful work there for all of us. And also,
Hi guys, sorry, my Wi-Fi totally cut out. Are you wrapping up, or would you like me to continue?
I'm just going over success criteria quickly. So, and yeah, I guess I think that I said the major parts of that. So if you want to go on to the timeline and budget, then we can wrap it up.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. If you just want to, I can't share my screen. I'm on my phone. So
Yeah.
if you just want to share your screen so people can see it. Did you touch on the rest of the governance objectives though?
I did. Yeah.
Okay, great. Awesome. So just moving on to budget. The budget will actually be changing as we're submitting a counter proposal for budget based off of some of the comments there. So the initial budget was 2.1 million. We are massively under budget from last year because not only because we had some buffer, but we just didn't spend as much money as we thought we were going to. So actually with the money in the bank, the money requested to the DAO is actually only 792,000 USDC. We're probably going to be decreasing this by a certain percentage in a counter proposal just based off of some feedback already. So I won't elaborate on that budget so much. But again, that covers not only the costs of the strategy, governance, and operations committee, as well as the operational costs of the foundation, but also our Radworks marketing budget, which I wish I could show you the link to the marketing objectives, but we've scoped out a couple of objectives with Sean and Becca and co about maintaining the Radworks marketing into 24 and the goals that we have with sponsorships, with social media, and all of that. All of that work will be managed by the strategy committee, and we will include more details in the next version of the proposal as well, because that was requested. So, and yeah, any additional costs are for accounting and auditing of the foundation, and some offsite costs and rent, but that's kind of what we're looking at. So yeah, so I think that's it. Sorry for the incredible bandwidth issues. If anybody has further questions and wants to hop on a call, feel free to just reach out to me or just write your responses in the forum. We're having a lot of conversation there.
Yes, thank you so much, Abby. And yeah, sorry about the bandwidth issues there, but hey, here we are on the internet, still dealing with all these fun things. It happens to all of us. Great, and thank you also to everyone who is still here. You're incredible. I will stop sharing my screen then for now. I think we'll maybe cap it up the questions since we've all been here for over 2 hours already. And as Abby said, please go take a look at the proposal itself and read. There's been a lot of discussion on that one because there's a lot to it. So maybe some of your questions also have already been answered, not only on this proposal, but others. So this is why, again, highly encourage you to go take a look. I will briefly finish up my call outs to the community that I was doing before, just finishing out those really quick. What I wanted to say, in addition to please read the proposals and the questions and leave feedback, just even if you're not planning to vote on the proposal, everybody's input is extremely valuable and appreciated, and it's an important piece of a healthy governance process. The proposals, I wrote this in the chat earlier, but I want to say it out loud once. All of these proposals, all of the 2024 org proposals, will move into the formal review stage of governance on Monday, meaning there will also be a snapshot poll that goes live on Monday, which is an off-chain vote portion of our governance process that allows the community to just gauge from the community what the general support for proposals are at that point in time. just please remember that this will be like the last point in the governance process where you can like give feedback and suggest changes before the proposal goes to an on-chain vote the following Monday. If you are planning to vote or delegate your voting power to someone else, please make sure you do so before Monday. Once a proposal goes live, you can't delegate to yourself or anyone else anymore, or you can, but the voting power will not be counted towards the vote. Just wanted to do a quick reminder there because we had some issues with this last time or for the 2023 org proposals. There's also, if you have questions or need help, please reach out to me on Discord. Always happy to help. Otherwise, we also have a really, really cool FAQ on our docs page that kind of goes over some basic tips and tricks and also has some nice troubleshooting pieces there for you as well. I just dropped it in the chat. I'll also include it in the links for the call. The call will be up tomorrow afternoon. And I'll also include all of the links that were shared throughout this call in the description. And yeah, that's it for now. Thank you everybody again for sticking around and for presenting and contributing in every way. And yeah, we'll call it here. Thanks everyone.
Thanks everybody.